go to seminars, they go to training, they go to some of your programs, and they get a heightened sense of awareness, they have a little bit of purpose, they have an idea of what to do, and then you leave. Or, I mean, everybody wants to go on a diet right after they've stuffed themselves with Thanksgiving, dinner. How do you keep that momentum going? Because, I mean, first of all, I bring up the suicides with you because that's something that you read in the paper, that happens in the town next door. It doesn't happen to us, and I think that's what most Americans are thinking, that that's somebody else's bad misfortune. Right.
Yeah, I think you're unusual if that hasn't happened to you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can say that better than anybody, Jay. Like our community.
Sure.
I think you're unusual. I don't mean to cut you off, but I think that used to be the thinking. It happened in the town next door. Really? You sure about that?
Well, and I don't think we take into consideration the attempts. I mean, we don't hear about those. And the other thing that we haven't really talked on is, you can be suicidal, but you can also be homicidal. And Parkland, Florida was a pretty sobering reminder last year, and it was 20 years after Columbine, and there's been several in between. But we know that when someone reaches their wit's end, or the ultimate level of hopelessness, they not only can harm themselves, but they could be looking to harm others. And it was really powerful where I live in the Albany, New York area. Parkland happened, and then I had a friend out in Western New York who had a near miss on a Friday. They learned of kids that had made bombs and had some guns stored and had a plan to put into action for the following week on Monday. And then, 20 minutes over the border of New York into Vermont, there was a near miss where a kid had purchased a gun and several rounds of ammunition. And then a month after, a kid was going to shoot up the school. He brought a gun to school. It wasn't loaded, but they got it in time, but he was going to harm people for picking on his transgender boyfriend. And this was 3 near misses within months after Parkland. And so we just don't know what else is out there. But I think that it's, suicide and homicide are hopelessness. And when we classify it as that hopelessness, it's the greatest threat to the safety and security of our kids. Whether it's themselves or someone harming, others. So when we start talking about hope and action and empathy activation, I think that's the biggest. People want to put armed guards and have security and mental, put a focus on mental health for depression and anxiety. I think it really boils down to, hope and action. It boils down to empathy, and bystander empowerment is really the biggest impact we can have on a safe and secure space for kids to be educated in.
And people say duh, but what are you doing? I mean, what are you doing really to arm a kid? I mean, we're disarming them with looking at Instagram and Facebook, and everybody's got an amazing life and mine sucks. And you're just disarming a kid, and you're not strengthening them. I mean, we know empathy is like a muscle in the brain. We know scientifically that you exercise it or you lose it. And Jason, for years, has developed this brand of empathetic fitness, where he is exercising these muscles that humans have just done. I mean, we talk a little bit about empathy, and we could spend hours talking about it, but we know that the amount of personal connection that humans have with each other, face-to-face contact. I mean, your subconscious mind, this brain that can do, several quadrillion things per second, it soaks up everything in its environment, but kids are spending half of their time in this 2-dimensional world and not in this 3-dimensional world. Personal connection. And we have to drive that. We have to make that happen more. And Jason forces kids into positions where they're forced to have more personal connection, because that grows empathy. And when we look at these young people, these near misses, and you look at the lessons that we learned from Columbine, I mean, those kids were searching for meaning in their life, purpose, and they had none. I mean, who was growing it in them? Not too many people. And I just, I crossed this bridge a couple, when Parkland happened, and I started to discuss it with people and had great, meaningful, deep, complicated discussions on this. And I just say Nicholas Cruz, there may be some mental health there. I'm sure there was. But I think he was about as hopeless as they come. I look at groups of kids and I say, who brought that kid consistently a hot chocolate in the 6th grade? In the 7th grade, who asked him to go out and throw the football every week when the weather turned nice? I mean, not many people. And this entire discussion for us and this bystander empowerment that we're talking a little bit about here, you know, I mentioned this before, you know, Einstein said this world is a dangerous place to live, not because of evil people, but because of those who choose to do nothing about it. And that truly is where the rubber meets the road. What are we actually doing? Or are we completely disarming our children so that they don't have to force themselves into these uncomfortable, vulnerable positions to make personal connections and to grow empathy the way that it's grown for thousands of years in human history? And don't get me wrong, human history's had a lot of issues with the way humans treat each other. But now where's it going? When we remove personal connection, when we remove a kid's natural abilities to make themselves vulnerable, when we heighten anxiety and fear, which is at an all-time record. They say it's now replaced depression in our children. So, I mean, it's really about bystander empowerment to us, and that's kind of a generic word, but we exercise kids and we have them grow empathetically.
I think it's a delicate balance, though, because my child's going to go to school. They're going to want to fit in. They're going to want to get along with everyone else, but yet we want them to have some misfortune and some things that don't go well so they can deal with the ups and downs of life. How do you balance that? How do you know you've not pushed too far or you let off the gas too much?
Well, you know, one of our pillows for teachers as well as parents is the, you know, teachable moments. And there's going to be moments where, you know, you're at a crossroads and you have, you know, that you could be horribly embarrassed. You know, one of the things that we say and that under that pillar or pillow is that good kids, really good kids, your daughter or my son are capable of making rotten decisions. And, you know, that's the immature brain, which is another pillow. And, you know, those moments that come to us, it's our biggest challenge as a teacher or a parent to find some value in that and find the silver lining and take away from it the learned opportunity to improve and see the value in those moments. You know, and I think that it's just going to be a process of taking each situation as it comes and, you know, celebrating the things that are positive and learning from the things that are negative.
Teachable moments, you know, we call it this pillow because our pillow test. As an athlete for years, I laid my head down on the pillow at night and said, I wish I had her, I'm glad I did. And I think that's a Dr. Rob Gilbert thing. When, you know, you lay your head down, because you have to every night. And when you say, I wish I had, you failed the pillow test. When you say, I'm glad I did, you passed the pillow test. And the beauty of the pillow test is you get to take it again every night. And there's so many times as a parent, and we said this, I'm not a parenting expert. I've just made a lot of mistakes. Just ask my kids, 4 kids, 21 down to 15. They'll just tell you how many mistakes I've made. But I've had the opportunity to learn from some great parents over the years. And one of the things I constantly remind myself when I put my head down the pillow at night, when I talk to a situation that my daughter Claudia had, and I royally screwed it up, I say, man, I wish I had. And then the next day I wake up, I make myself vulnerable, and I go knock on her door and I apologize for the jerk that I was because I screamed at her because I was stressed out about other things in my life. And I use it as a teachable moment to say to my own daughter, listen, I was really stressed out with what's going on with mom. I was really stressed out with what's going on with work and not being here because I'm on the road traveling and I should have done this and I shouldn't have said that to you. I'm sorry. That's a teachable moment for a kid to hear a father apologize when she made the mistake, you know, when she didn't follow the rules. It's a real teachable moment for her. She knows she screwed up. I mean, she's 17. It's a real teachable moment, and the true magic is in she's learning how to apologize because she's seeing me do it. So, you know, that pillow that we give to parents all the time is make all of these things, especially the worst thing that's happened to you, make it a teachable moment. I always tell people, I say, make that the best thing that's ever happened to you.
Yeah, we had a friend whose daughter got caught, 14-year-old, and real successful guy, real spotless family, strong values. He was just appalled and reached out to us on a personal level, but we have some great professional interactions with him. But he was just appalled that his daughter was vaping at 14, and then he decided to take her cell phone and learned her, got the password and started looking through her social media and seeing, references to Hitler, a lot of racist stuff, really inappropriate content. And he was just, blown away and appalled by it and completely shamed. And I said, this is one of the best things that you've ever had happen. She's only 14. You think about if you didn't find out that she was vaping, if you didn't get a hold of the phone and know the password, and it was 2 years from now when she's 16 behind the wheel of a car. So I think sometimes we, get caught up in some of the shame and the guilt, and I think that, I can think of a student athlete this year in my school. He punched a hole in the wall after a competition out of anger, and what a great experience and opportunity that was for the entire team to learn about making, some poor choices after, in an emotional space. But the work that we did after that everyone got to benefit from around how to handle emotions and put some strategies in place to deal with those high, intense moments. Those could be some great teachable moments. And, if you don't expect a 14-year-old to be on social media unsupervised and say and do some things that are probably going to be inappropriate or questionable, I think your expectations are probably not age appropriate. They're going to do those they're going to push limits and explore boundaries. So it's all about trying to find the value in those moments.
You bring up cell phones. I frequently reflect on my parenting skills or lack thereof, or at least I'm mindful of it and I'm entertaining it. I've come to the conclusion, but my number one mistake with my daughter is giving her a cell phone.
Yeah, I get a little angry on this one, but what people don't realize is I see 260 kids, and that's actually just my course, but it's also an additional 60 that come during off periods or push into my class in physical education. So I'll see probably around 300, 320 kids over the course of 2 days. And so I know a lot of kids, more than most people, right? And then I've done it for 21 years now. So I've seen thousands of kids, and year after year I see them grow and mature, and I just don't want to have the conversation anymore with people who have kids in elementary or middle school about cell phones. The damage that it's doing is so black and white. It's like you can't argue with it. It's toxic, and I don't say that to make you feel bad, but you're right. I mean, it's like we are trained as parents to what are we going to do this year for Christmas, or what are we going to give him for his birthday this year? Oh, we got to give him a smartphone. Why? Well, because all their friends have them, right? And you fall into that trap. And it's the same reason you sign them up for advanced soccer, or you have them try out for all-stars, or you bring them to that elite coach when they're 13 and they haven't even hit maturity yet or puberty yet, and they're doing strength training with an elite strength and conditioning coach. And so we do all these things because that's what everybody else is doing, and we're just trying to keep up. But I don't think a smartphone personally, and again, I don't intend to project my views on people, and I know that there's some good, well-meaning and intelligent people that have handed a smartphone over to a 10-year-old. But statistically, when you look at the science around it, I don't want to have that conversation. It doesn't make any sense. It's like the exact opposite. It's actually sliding a smartphone across to a kid on their birthday is the same as sliding them a glass of vodka and say, hey, you have a tough day, use this to cope. It's the same brain response. The brain doesn't know the difference between vodka and smartphones. It's a dopamine hit, and it's short-lived, and it increases anxiety and depression the same way as alcoholism. So I think that, that's my hard stance on it. Is it happening? Yeah, it's happening. Kids, and we give kids computers and tablets in schools. So now it's not just the smartphones, it's also access to all this, the internet and this cyberspace that we have to figure out positive ways to handle. So, I don't want to write anyone off for purchasing their kid a smartphone, but I think we really got to start to look at it differently. I think the future is going to be the idea of detoxifying with technology, but also going with flip phones. And for me, I prefer 16. You know, if you can put them behind the wheel of a car, then sure, you can have a smartphone at 16 and learn some good citizenship around, you know, social media and
So the first thing I would always recommend, and again, this could be days worth of discussion here, is Twangy's book, iGen. I would always recommend. There is no ambiguity in the fact that happiness is cut in half when you give a kid a phone. There's no, across every indicator, you're reducing your child's happiness by half when you give them a smartphone. And I don't want to go into her work because she's far more brilliant than I'll ever be. But Jason's right. We have a culture of kids that have dopamine responses. And remember, dopamine isn't like the actual content. I'm not talking about that. This is a good nugget for parents. Dopamine really hits in anticipation. And it was designed that way. It evolved that way, whatever you want to say, that when you know you were on the savannah and you saw a deer, you were like, oh, and you got this dopamine hit in anticipation of it. And then you shoot an arrow and you hit it and you get another one and then you follow it for miles and miles and it feels good. When they get that bing or that buzz or that bong on their phone, it's not the content. Most parents, I think, confuse the content with the fact that they're getting something in anticipation, and that becomes the addiction. The content is completely different, and that's a completely different discussion of what kids are viewing. And if you think a kid's gonna be responsible, I always tell people, my son loves to shoot. Very proud that he likes to shoot. He goes and has a professional coach that, you know, when he was ready for it, because that was what his part of his meaning, does a lot of skeet shooting. But I would never, at the age of 10, say, hey buddy, take this loaded handgun and keep it in your room. Because I understand that his brain's not fully formed yet. And you put this device in their hand where they have unfettered access. And if you think that you got control over what they're doing on it, I don't want to call you crazy as a parent, but you're crazy. I go into schools, I promise you, this has happened 10 times this year. I can't get on the Wi-Fi, and the kids know how to get on it. And I don't even know what they call it, but they have VPN workarounds, programs that run that can get around the school's security. And they just know how to do it. And if you don't think they're going to get around what you've got in place, what you think you have in place, and I'm sure there's very good programs, I'm sure some of them are very successful, but eventually they'll figure it out. I tell you about this, I was up in front of 800 kids. The kids are incredible. And this was just a couple weeks ago. I'm up in front of 800 kids. I got 2 kids. I pull my phone out of my pocket, right? And doesn't this smart kid in the audience figure out that I have my eye drop on, like for my iPhone, the eye drop, right? And all of a sudden, I got a kid here and a kid here, and I'm doing an exercise in front of the whole school. And all of a sudden, I see this bare rear end with a thong pop up. And I swear, you have to hit accept or decline. And I got 2 kids, and I'm like this. And doesn't this smart little guy out in the audience, some high school kid, airdrop me some rear end with a thong on? And immediately, because I'm fast, I screenshot it and I decline, like in like a second. I'm like, I didn't even anticipate it. Hit it, and I put it away and finished our exercise. I go back and look because in the corner was this Snapchat code, right? And when I go look at it, it wasn't even a rear end. It was a pumpkin with a thong on. But he wanted to see my reaction and how, you know, what I would do in front of these 2 kids, especially if they saw it pop up on my phone. My point is, man, they're ingenious. And if you think you're gonna stay ahead of the curve, good luck. Your parents had no idea what you were doing with you when you were a kid, but you also didn't have unfettered access to everything.
Yeah, there's kids that, you know, when we talk about vaping and we talk about some of the stuff that goes on in middle school, there, you know, I know of a young man that can order on Amazon anything he wants and have it sent to a house in the neighborhood that's abandoned. And he can go pick that up at that house and get whatever he wants off the internet on Amazon, and tomorrow he'll have it, right? So I mean, there's stuff that kids are doing that far outthinks where we're at times. So you really got to be on your toes, and that's why I think that when we hand them that device, when we give them that access, we really got to know what we're doing.
And just to circle back around with the whole thing, I mean, it comes down to parenting, and it comes down to the rules, the standards you have in place, and if you haven't thought deeply about those things, if you haven't thought really deeply about the fact that you're just going to say whatever to your kid, just don't forget that their brain is not fully formed. And do you want it to form when they have unfettered access to anything?